Hello family, welcome to Compiler Tales. Please subscribe and turn on post notifications, and don't forget to share with your friends and loved ones because it means the whole world to me. Now the tale begins. The streets of Mushin never apologized. They were lined with broken dreams, hard voices, and the smell of burning rubber mixed with survival. Nathaniel Nate Okonkwo grew up on one of these streets, where kids played with tires and food vendors roasted corn beside stagnant gutters. His mother, Mama Chinyere, raised him single-handedly after his father passed from a factory injury that no one took responsibility for. She was once a respected schoolteacher, but hardship had bent her back and hardened her hands. Still, she poured scripture and strength into her son, reminding him daily that the measure of a man wasn't his money, but his integrity. Nathaniel walked barefoot to school until age 14 and started working odd jobs by 15, shining shoes, carrying cement for masons, and later, learning to clean and serve tables at a beachside restaurant in Victoria Island. By 23, Nathaniel had already tasted the bitterness of dreams deferred. He once aspired to be an architect. He loved drawing buildings in the sand, designing homes in notebooks he kept under his mattress. But there was no tuition money, and no family member could offer support. So instead, he found dignity in waiting tables. Unlike others who mocked him, he stood tall in his white shirt and black apron, always smiling, always patient. The guests at the upscale restaurant often mistook him for the manager because of how articulate and thoughtful he was. He never allowed Mushin to leave his character, but he refused to let it define his fate either. He wrote Bible verses behind his locker door and started each shift with a quiet prayer. Lord, make me excellent even in the shadows. Nathaniel wasn't a loud man, but his presence left an impression. His colleagues respected him, though they often wonder how he managed to stay hopeful with so little. The truth was, Nathaniel had learned from Mama Chinyere that honor was wealth. She often said, "Now who days shine from inside go bright outside," meaning it's the content of a man that makes him visible. Still, even with his values, there were nights Nathaniel cried quietly in the storeroom after guests insulted him or mocked his profession. But every night, he opened his small tattered Bible and reminded himself that even Joseph started in a pit before Pharaoh gave him a crown. Nathaniel believed his crown would come. He just didn't know it would cost him his heart first. In the affluent suburb of East Legon, Accra, Ghana, Isabella Moore was everything Nathaniel was not. Born to a Ghanaian real estate tycoon and a Nigerian high society mother, Isabella's life was gold-plated from the beginning. She attended the best international schools, took violin lessons as a child, and spent holidays in Dubai and Cape Town. But beneath the luxury was a child who longed to be seen without being compared. Her father was distant, always working. Her mother was present but emotionally absent, grooming Isabella to become a powerful man's wife. Emotions were treated like dust, swept under the Persian rug of ambition. By the time Isabella graduated with a degree in marketing from a top university, she was fluent in numbers, fluent in manipulation, but illiterate in vulnerability. When Isabella got a job offer in Lagos at Vortex Group, a luxury branding agency, her mother insisted she go. "You need to be among the movers," she said, referring to Lagos's elite. Isabella, ambitious yet unsure, obeyed. She settled in Ikoyi and began building a new circle of corporate socialites. But deep within, something always felt hollow. One rainy afternoon, she accompanied her team to scout a venue for a brand event, an upscale restaurant in Victoria Island. That's when she first saw Nathaniel. He wasn't remarkable at first glance, but something about his calmness amidst chaos struck her. He served a spilled drink with a gentle nod and whispered to her, "Rain has purpose, even when it ruins a dress." She blinked twice. No man had ever spoken to her like that. From that moment, Isabella became curious. She found herself volunteering to return to that restaurant under the guise of work errands. She'd watch Nathaniel from a corner, noticing how he treated guests with more reverence than most CEOs treat their staff. One day, she purposely dropped her napkin near him. He picked it up, handed it over with a subtle smile, and said, "Sometimes people drop things because they want someone to notice." She felt seen, not as a status symbol, not as a project, but as a person. Still, the war between her upbringing and her heart began to stir. Could a man who held trays for a living ever hold her future? Their first actual conversation happened by mistake, or perhaps divine orchestration. Isabella's heel twisted while she rushed out of a corporate meeting at the restaurant, and Nathaniel caught her elbow before she hit the floor. "Careful," he said. "Life trips us when we rush the moments." She chuckled, surprised by her laughter. That day they exchanged names, nothing more. But from that spark, their paths began weaving in gentle secrecy. Nathaniel would occasionally sneak her a note with her drink order, usually a proverb or Bible verse. She started waiting for those notes. Her friends noticed her distraction, but Isabella never explained. She didn't know how to say she had found peace in the most unexpected man. Their meetings became intentional. She'd ask about his day, and he'd ask about her dreams. He never judged her for wanting to climb higher, and she never shamed him for serving tables. In fact, Nathaniel had a way of making her feel like ambition didn't have to destroy affection. He once told her, "God gave us both purpose. Yours might be in boardrooms, mine might be in plates, but purpose is purpose." It made her cry. No man had ever made her feel as seen. Still, she kept the relationship hidden. She wasn't ready to introduce her friends or her family to a waiter. It was her heart's biggest contradiction. Nathaniel, on the other hand, started believing he had found his destiny. He saved every tip, bought her small, thoughtful gifts, wrote her poems, and even planned a beachside surprise one evening, where he revealed he'd been saving for architecture school again. Isabella clapped, smiled, and kissed his forehead, but inside, doubt was growing. She loved his soul, but feared his world. Society had trained her to believe a man's job measured his worth. She never told him that her mother would disown her if she ever found out. She didn't tell him about the elite suitor her mother had arranged in Accra. And Nathaniel, blinded by sincerity, never suspected that love alone might not be enough. They made it work for a while. Secret dates in quiet corners of Victoria Island. Lunches eaten in his break room during her midday breaks. Isabella started skipping executive dinners to sit beside Nathaniel on wooden benches, sharing roasted plantain and groundnuts, while he told her about his dream of designing low-cost housing in Lagos. She loved his vision, but feared his proximity. He had no car, no business card, and no formal title. Every time he kissed her forehead, she felt both butterflies and shame. Still, love felt more real in the silence with Nathaniel than in all the noise of her social circle. And so, one evening under the stars at Badagry Beach, when he knelt with a simple ring and trembling hands, she said yes, quietly, hesitantly, but yes. They got married in a modest church in Ikorodu. Only Nathaniel's family was present, Mama Chinyere, 3 cousins, and his pastor. Isabella wore a borrowed gown. There was no honeymoon, no Instagram post, no announcement. She told her friends she was focusing on work, and told her mother nothing at all. Nathaniel, ever hopeful, believed love didn't need a crowd to bloom. He told her, Jesus turned water into wine for a wedding no one important attended. Maybe that's how our miracle begins. Isabella smiled, but the smile didn't reach her heart. In her journal that night, she wrote, "I love him, but I don't know if I can carry his world forever." Their first apartment was a single-room flat in Ajij. Nathaniel worked long hours to furnish it, using crates as chairs and sleeping on a mattress without a frame. He painted scriptures on the walls, Psalm 127 verse 1, "Unless the Lord builds the house," and decorated their room with love notes. Isabella started avoiding bringing colleagues over. When asked about her marital status at work, she changed the subject. Nathaniel noticed, but chalked it up to adjustment. He didn't know that the cracks were growing, that his love, pure as it was swimming against tides stronger than heartbreak, tides named pride, status, and shame. Married life, once wrapped in poetic sunsets and stolen kisses, quickly bowed to the weight of daily survival. Their cramped self-contained apartment in Ajij had a leaking sink, an unreliable fan, and a neighbor who played loud Fuji music at odd hours. But Nathaniel kept smiling. He rose before dawn, ironed a shirt with care, and kissed Isabella's forehead before rushing to his early shift. Between the restaurant and evening catering gigs, he barely had time to eat, but he always made sure there was dinner ready for her when she returned. He'd paste scriptures on the wall to encourage her, verses like Romans 8 verse 28. All things work together for good, hoping they'd warm the air like missing furniture couldn't. But Isabella no longer saw beauty in struggle. All she saw was lack. Isabella's new job at Vantage Access Media brought her into a world where luxury was expected, not earned. Her boss, Anthony Iene, was everything Nathaniel wasn't: polished, commanding, and dangerously charismatic. He noticed her from her first presentation and made her feel exceptional, often complimenting her courage to rise above. At first, she mentioned her husband, but the conversations always shifted to his ambition, his dreams, his potential. Slowly, she stopped mentioning Nathaniel altogether. Anthony began assigning her to high-profile campaigns and inviting her to after-hours dinners to prepare for presentations. Meanwhile, Nathaniel missed birthdays and weekend plans just to buy her a new office bag. She thanked him with distracted hugs and eyes that no longer gleamed. The more Nathaniel tried to please, the more she drifted into a world he couldn't afford to enter. He noticed the expensive perfume, the new jewelry, and the subtle shift in her language. How she now referred to their apartment as that place, and their wedding as a rushed decision. He prayed harder, fasted occasionally, and tried to read the signs without jumping to conclusions. One night he asked gently, "Are we okay?" And she responded, "Maybe I outgrew this phase of my life." He swallowed pain like acid, wondering when he had become a phase. That night, he wrote in his journal, "Lord, love should be enough, but it seems status speaks louder in her ears." Isabella stopped wearing her wedding ring. At first, she claimed it didn't match her new office outfits. Then she said it irritated her skin. Nathaniel noticed, but didn't confront her. He feared the answer. She began returning home later and later, claiming work or client dinners. Her phone was always on silent. One day, while she showered, her phone buzzed. Nathaniel saw the preview. "I wish I could wake up next to you." His heart stopped. He didn't open the full message. Instead, he walked to the mirror, looked at himself, and whispered, "God, is this how good men become bitter?" That evening, he served dinner as usual, cracked a joke, and waited for her laughter. It never came. Her eyes were elsewhere. So was her soul. At a work gala held in Lecce, Nathaniel was assigned to serve drinks through his catering gig. He spotted Isabella across the room, laughing with Anthony, adorned in a dress he hadn't seen before. He approached slowly, tray in hand, when Anthony turned to her and asked, "Who's that?" Without hesitation, she chuckled lightly and said, "Just a waiter. We see them everywhere, don't we?" Their eyes met. Nathaniel froze. The wine glass on his tray trembled. His lips parted, but no words came. The room spun. People clapped for the keynote speaker. But in Nathaniel's world, everything collapsed. That night, he didn't go home. He sat by the third mainland bridge, watching boats cut through water and wondering how people moved forward after being publicly erased by someone they loved. He returned home 2 days later, packed a few clothes, and wrote her a note. It was simple, but pierced like a blade. "Peter denied Jesus 3 times, but he wept. You denied me once," and laughed. "I loved you sincerely, but I will not fight for someone who finds shame in my hands." He didn't wait for her reaction. He dropped the house key beside her jewelry box and walked out. He carried only his Bible, his journal, and a photograph of their wedding day, the one she never posted. Isabella returned that evening to silence, an empty shelf, and the echo of a goodbye she never thought he'd say. Nathaniel disappeared into Badagry. The coastal town, known for its slave history and quiet shores, became his healing ground. He found work as a janitor in a modest hotel that faced the sea. The pay was low, but the ocean was free, and so was the peace. He spent his days cleaning floors and his nights journaling prayers. His room was small, just enough for a bed, Bible, and broken dreams. But in that simplicity, he started breathing again. He'd sit by the shoreline at dawn, watching fishermen return with their nets, and whisper Psalm 42, verse 11. Why, my soul, are you downcast? Put your hope in God. For once he was alone, but not lonely. The absence of betrayal was a kind of comfort. Isabella, meanwhile, climbed at work but descended in spirit. Her affair with Anthony Iene didn't bring the fulfillment she imagined. He controlled, not cared. He demanded, never asked. Her moments with him were transactional, gifts for silence, praise for obedience. Eventually, she realized she had traded a man who served in humility for one who seduced in dominance. Her friends, once impressed by her new life, slowly noticed the cracks. One even whispered, "You looked happier when you were poorer." But Isabella was too proud to admit regret. She continued smiling for cameras and crying under showers. She texted Nathaniel once, "Are you okay?" But he never replied. In Badegry, Nathaniel started writing letters he'd never send. Letters to God. Letters to Isabella. Letters to the man he used to be. He met a local pastor who gave him a blank notebook and said, "Sometimes healing isn't forgetting. It's remembering without bleeding." One evening, while mopping the hotel lobby, a child ran past him chasing a kite. She reminded him of something he couldn't name. The child stumbled, and Nathaniel caught her just in time. Her mother came rushing, apologetic, breathless, and grateful. That was the first time he laid eyes on Angela Dankwa. Angela Dankwa had the tired eyes of a woman who had carried too much for too long. A Ghanaian by birth, she had married young to a man who vanished the moment their daughter, Imani, was diagnosed as deaf. Left alone, ridiculed by in-laws, and burdened by bills, Angela moved to Cape Coast with her child, taking refuge in an old guest house left to her by her late grandfather. The guest house was crumbling, walls damp, roof sagging, but it offered her and Imani shelter. Angela sold handmade soaps to pay for Imani's therapy. Most days, she prayed not for prosperity, but for rest. Rest from judgment, rest from pity, rest from the fear that one day her daughter would ask, "Why didn't Daddy love me enough to stay?" Imani was 5, small, curious, and painfully innocent. She had large expressive eyes and a giggle that escaped her lips even without sound. On a Sunday afternoon, while they vacationed briefly in Badegry to attend a women's retreat, Imani lost her toy at the beach. Nathaniel saw the panic in her mother's eyes as the girl wandered too close to the tide. He ran, scooped her up, and handed her the toy with a smile. Angela thanked him. Their hands touched briefly, and for the first time in months, she felt safe. Nathaniel noticed her silence, not the quiet of politeness, but the stillness of exhaustion. "You're carrying more than you should," he said softly. Angela nodded, tears threatening to fall. They didn't speak again that day, but the moment stayed with them both. Days later, they met again. Imani ran to him when they crossed paths near the marketplace. Angela smiled. "She remembers you." Nathaniel knelt to her level and signed a simple hello with his fingers. Imani squealed with joy. Angela was stunned. "You sign?" Nathaniel nodded. "A little. I once taught at a Sunday school for kids with special needs." That night, Angela invited him to dinner. The guest house dining room had no lights, just candles and quiet laughter. They ate yam and garden eggs under the stars, and Angela found herself sharing stories she hadn't told anyone in years. Nathaniel listened, not to respond, but to understand. She told him, "I'm not looking for a man. I'm just tired of being a warrior every single day." He replied, "Then let me be your peace, even if for just one night." The sky was already crying when Angela drove out of Cape Coast with Imani in the back seat, humming silently to her doll. They had gone out to buy soap-making ingredients, and Angela was in a rush to return before the roads turned deadly. The rain, heavy and blinding, reduced her visibility as she navigated the old narrow road that led back to the guest house. As she rounded a bend, the tire skidded, once, then twice, before the car spun off the road and landed nose first into a shallow ravine, tilted dangerously on its side. Angela's scream was drowned by thunder. Imani was screaming too, her hands pounding on the window, terrified, unable to comprehend what was happening in words, only in vibrations. The doors were jammed, and smoke had begun seeping from under the dashboard. Angela prayed loudly, banging on the glass with her elbows, hoping someone, anyone, would see them. Nathaniel was coming from a late evening prayer walk when he heard the screech. At first, he thought it was lightning striking something nearby, but then he heard a muffled cry. Without thinking, he ran barefoot down the slope, ignoring the mud, soaking his trousers. He reached the car and saw Angela trapped, her eyes wide with panic, Imani sobbing beside her. "Help me!" she cried, her voice hoarse. Nathaniel found a stone and smashed the window with steady blows. He pulled the child out first, shielding her head as glass scattered around them. Then he reached in again, struggling against the smoke to drag Angela free. Moments after he got them out, the car emitted a final hiss and caught fire. Onlookers who had gathered watched in stunned silence. A teenager among them captured everything on his phone. Nathaniel, out of breath, just held Angela and said, "God still sees you. He saw you today." That video changed everything. It went viral within hours on social media. "Unknown janitor saves mother and deaf child from burning car." The headlines read. People praised his courage, unaware that Nathaniel had once been a man too familiar with rejection and invisible wounds. Angela, recovering in bed at the guest house, stared at him in awe, not because he had saved her, but because he hadn't hesitated. She offered him a room in the guest house and food from her kitchen, not out of gratitude, but because something about him brought peace to her tired heart. He moved in that week, and for the first time in a long while, the guest house felt warm again, even though it still leaked when it rained. Nathaniel spent most mornings with Imani, teaching her sign language using flashcards, songs, and Bible stories. He used the story of David and Goliath to teach her courage, of Noah to teach her obedience, but mostly, he used the parables of Jesus to teach her about compassion, the kind that didn't come from wealth or power, but from the heart. Angela watched quietly from the corridor, eyes welling up with emotion. Imani's giggles filled the air like a revival. She started signing back with more accuracy, and Nathaniel celebrated every gesture like it was an Olympic win. He never treated Imani like a child to be managed, but a person to be understood. Angela, who once felt burdened by her child's difference, began to feel chosen instead. Over cups of hot Milo and shared garden work, Angela and Nathaniel spoke deeply. She told him about her past, how she married for love and ended up abandoned, how family turned their backs when Imani was born incomplete. As her in-laws once said, Nathaniel didn't offer pity. He offered silence that made room for healing. Then, slowly, he began opening up too. He told her about Isabella, about a love that began in whispers and ended in betrayal, about the night he stood in a crowded event hall and watched the woman he adored pretend not to know him. Angela didn't gasp. She didn't say sorry. She simply said, "You deserve to be seen." And for the first time in years, Nathaniel felt like he truly had been. Back in Lagos, Isabella's world was beginning to crumble. Her affair with Anthony Iene had fizzled out, now replaced with his manipulation and subtle threats. The promises of promotion disappeared. He started ignoring her calls, and at work, he handed her files with sarcasm instead of admiration. She was no longer his rising star. She was now just another conquered territory. And then one day, while scrolling through Instagram, she saw the video. Her husband, the man she once denied, now celebrated across West Africa as a hero. The caption read, "Real men don't wear suits. They wear courage." She froze. The comments were endless. "He deserves the world. Whoever let him go was blind." The truth landed in her chest like a hammer. She had traded gold for glitter, and now glitter was choking her. Driven by guilt, regret, and a need to see the man she once loved, Isabella flew to Ghana. She tracked him to Cape Coast, using details from the viral video and a series of posts shared by local community pages. The guest house wasn't hard to find. It was the only one with wildflowers by the gate and children's drawings on the window panes. She stood outside the faded fence, unsure whether to knock or turn away. Through the curtain, she saw Nathaniel laughing with Imani as he helped her plant a hibiscus. Angela stepped out moments later with a tray of oranges, smiling. They looked like a family. A picture she once scoffed at now stabbed at her deeply. She finally knocked. Angela opened the door. There was a moment of frozen air as two women measured each other with quiet eyes. "I came to see Nathaniel," Isabella said. Angela nodded and called him. When he stepped into the doorway and saw Isabella, he didn't flinch. He simply said, "I thought you'd come sooner." She broke down instantly. "I made a mistake, Nate. I let pride lead me. I loved you. I was just afraid of what people would say. I forgot what God was saying." He listened, face unreadable. "I never stopped loving you," she said through tears. "Please, can we try again?" He took a breath and replied, "You loved me when it was convenient, then denied me when it wasn't. And now that someone else saw what you threw away, you remember." His voice didn't rise, but it cracked in the places where forgiveness hadn't yet taken root. Later that night, as Angela served dinner, Nathaniel told her about the visit. "She came with her heart in her hands," he whispered. Angela looked up. "And," Nathaniel replied, "she lost me when I became a shame she couldn't afford. You found me when I was nothing and still believed I had worth." Angela said nothing. She just touched his hand gently and whispered, "She may have broken you, but you survived. You get to choose what love looks like now." And for the first time, Nathaniel allowed himself to believe that maybe God wasn't punishing him with brokenness, but protecting him through redirection. Isabella returned to Lagos Hollow. Her apartment now felt like a cage, a museum of choices made in vanity. Anthony Iene, once her source of admiration, now barely greeted her in meetings. Whispers circulated the office about their past affair. Her name was no longer spoken with awe but caution. In a last blow of cruelty, Anthony requested she be transferred to a smaller client department. She declined the offer and resigned instead. Her phone stopped ringing. Invitations dried up. The friends who once hyped her disappeared, one by one. She had climbed the ladder of status only to find it leaned against the wrong building. And at the top, there was no peace. Just shame and the ghost of a love she buried with pride. With nowhere else to go, Isabella found herself in Mushin, standing outside Mama Chinyer's modest house. The old woman opened the door slowly, leaning on her cane. She recognized Isabella immediately. "You broke my son," she said calmly, "and you didn't even write to say sorry." Isabella broke down, begging, "Mama, I don't know who I am anymore. Everything I thought mattered. None of it means anything now." Mama Chinyer took a long breath, motioned her inside, and placed a Bible on her lap. "Read Proverbs 14 verse 1. Isabella's hand shook. She found the verse. "The wise woman builds her house, but with her own hands the foolish one tears hers down." The tears came like a flood. "I was the foolish one," she whispered. "I tore it down." Mama Chinyer nodded slowly and said, "But the Lord restores ruins, child, if you let him." That night, Isabella slept in a room she had once sneered at when Nathaniel invited her. The walls were bare, the mattress thin, but for the first time in months, she rested without pretense. The next morning, she joined Mama Chinyer for prayers. Her voice cracked during worship, and when she tried to sing, all she could do was cry. But Mama Chinyer placed a hand on her head and said, "These are the songs that reach God the fastest, the ones with tears." And so began her journey not back to Nathaniel, but back to herself. Because sometimes repentance is not about winning someone back. It's about becoming someone who would never lose them again. The guest house sat quietly that afternoon, bathed in the stillness of a sun that hung like a watchful eye. Angela was cleaning Nathaniel's room while he was out teaching Imani her lesson when she found the old envelope, thick with folded pages and yellowed edges. It was tucked between his prayer journal and an aged Bible that looked worn from years of searching for answers. She didn't open the letters. She didn't have to. The handwriting on the envelope was unmistakably Isabella's, and the dates told her all she needed to know. She sat with the envelope resting on her lap, like a weight that wasn't hers to carry. When Nathaniel returned and found her there, he looked down, not from shame, but from tiredness. "You deserve to know," he began softly, And then he told her everything. The proposal under moonlight, the marriage without guests, the betrayal at a gala, and the note he left behind. Angela didn't cry. She just reached for the Bible beside the letters and said, "Let's put it between us. Not to hide it, but to measure it against the truth." That night, they sat outside under the mango tree. Nathaniel wrestled with words while Angela played with Imani's braids. "Do you think I'm building on broken ground?" he asked. Angela smiled sadly and responded, "Only broken things can be rebuilt stronger." Nathaniel confessed that part of him still wondered if choosing Angela meant running away from the wreckage instead of facing it. She didn't flinch. Instead, she said something so honest it pierced him. "I won't ask you to pick me because I stayed. But if you do pick me, let it be because peace found you here, not because pain chased you from there." Later, while Imani was drawing by candlelight, she slid her paper across the table. On it was a sketch of 3 stick figures holding hands, one tall, one medium, and one small, with hearts above them and a home in the background. She pointed at it, smiled, and signed, "Is this what a family looks like?" Nathaniel didn't answer that night. Instead, he fasted for 3 days, not out of religion, but out of need. He visited Pastor Kojo, who offered only a short sermon and a long silence. "Sometimes clarity doesn't come in thunder," the old pastor said. "It comes in whispers after the storm." Nathaniel returned to the guest house afterward, not with a decision, but with peace that God wasn't angry, just waiting. And maybe that was enough for now. The wind carried the scent of salt and old grief as Nathaniel stood by his father's grave in Mushin. The headstone was modest, chipped at the corner, but it bore the name of the man who once told him, "Your hands may serve, but let your heart never kneel before what is not worthy." Nathaniel knelt anyway, not in defeat, but in surrender. He wept alone, whispering apologies to the man buried beneath the soil. "I didn't become an architect, Papa, but I didn't become bitter either. Does that count?" His tears soaked the journal pages he had brought to leave behind. Inside them were old blueprints of houses he'd drawn as a teenager, verses he had underlined over the years, and a poem he once wrote about love that doesn't flinch. He placed the journal at the grave like an offering, then stood up slowly, lighter somehow. That evening, back in Cape Coast, a letter awaited him. It was from Isabella. There were no flowers, no perfume stains, just honesty. She wrote, "I'm not writing to beg. I'm writing because I met the mirror and realized it wasn't broken. It was me. I used to blame the world for not giving me better, but now I see I threw away the best thing it gave me. If you've moved on, I'll clap for you. If you haven't, I'll wait for God's will. But whatever happens, please know I'm trying to become someone who doesn't lose people for sport anymore." Nathaniel folded the letter slowly. There were no tears, no rage, only a strange warmth that came with truth acknowledged. Sometimes closure is not about reunion. Sometimes it's about release. Angela read the letter later that night after Nathaniel handed it to her. She nodded as she read, eyes calm. "She's hurting," she said, "and that's not something to dance on. It's something to pray over." Nathaniel looked at her, really looked at her. The way her hands cradled broken things without flinching, the way her voice carried no competition, only clarity. "You're not second choice," he said quietly. "You're just the first woman who didn't ask me to become someone else before being loved." Angela smiled but said nothing, because sometimes love grows best in silence, especially when it finally feels safe to be still. Weeks passed, and the guest house began to change, not because of money, but because of meaning. Nathaniel, with Angela's blessing, began turning 2 spare rooms into small sanctuaries for single mothers like her, women bruised by abandonment and battered by shame. Word spread in the community, and donations started trickling in. An old sofa here, a sewing machine there, bags of cement from a local pastor. One morning, under the very moonlight where he had once proposed to Isabella, Nathaniel knelt again, this time beside Angela. He didn't bring a ring. He brought a ribbon tied around Imani's drawing of their family. "I won't ask you to complete me," he whispered. "You already showed me I was never broken. But I want to build life with you, brick by brick, laugh by laugh." Angela nodded, tears pooling. This time, let's build a home that no pride can tear down. The next few months were filled with both progress and simplicity. Imani now ran through the guest house corridors, laughing louder each day. Nathaniel taught her how to write Daddy on a chalkboard one sunny afternoon. When she finally said it aloud, hesitantly, breathlessly, he froze. Angela gasped. It was the first word Imani had ever said without using her hands. Nathaniel dropped to his knees and sobbed, clutching her to his chest as if his heart had just been repaired with that single syllable. It wasn't just a word. It was redemption. It was heaven saying, "Yes, this is family." Isabella heard about the event through a mutual friend online. She smiled through tears. She hadn't seen Nathaniel in person since the day outside the guest house, but something inside her had changed since then. She no longer searched for shortcuts to happiness. She started attending a Bible-based trauma support group. One of the girls there asked her one day, "What did you lose most in your past?" Isabella replied quietly, "I lost someone who loved me when I had nothing and wanted nothing more than my honesty. That's the deepest kind of loss, when you see yourself through someone's mercy and still walk away." But this time, her regret didn't imprison her, it matured her. Back in Lagos, Isabella had rented a tiny one-bedroom apartment in Surulere. She worked part-time at a girls' resource center run by a local church that focused on vocational skills for abuse survivors. The girls called her Auntie Isa, unaware of her past, but sensitive to her kindness. One of the girls, 12-year-old Nkechi, asked one day, "Why do you cry when you talk about true love?" Isabella chuckled and replied, "Because I once confused love with how loud someone could speak for me. But real love, it speaks quietly and stays even when no one is clapping." The pain hadn't vanished, but it had transformed. It had turned into purpose. She wrote devotionals and guided young women through sessions titled Beauty Beyond Bargaining. There was healing in giving. Pastor Kojo visited her one Thursday afternoon. She served him herbal tea in a chipped mug, and he looked around at her modest home with approving eyes. "You didn't lose love, Isabella," he said after a long silence. "You misplaced it, and now you found what matters more." She nodded. "I just wonder if redemption always has to look like reconciliation," she confessed. The pastor smiled. "No. Sometimes redemption is the permission to begin again, with or without applause." He laid a worn Bible on her table and flipped to Isaiah 61 verse 3. "To appoint unto them that mourn in Zion beauty for ashes, the oil of joy for mourning." Isabella cried again. But this time, the tears were not of shame. They were of gratitude. She began dreaming of opening her own counseling and healing space for young girls one day. The dream wasn't backed by money or status, just faith and lessons learned. She stopped stalking Nathaniel's life and instead prayed for it. In a journal she now kept, she wrote, "I may never be part of his future, but I will never again dishonor the part one had in his past." And in that journal, beneath her favorite verse, Proverbs 24 verse 16, "Though the righteous fall 7 times, they rise again," she began to sketch blueprints for a new life. Not for applause, not for redemption, but simply because the ashes no longer defined her. Angela had always been strong, the kind of strong that held people up even when her legs trembled. But strength didn't stop the fatigue that had been dragging her body for months. It began with headaches, then joint pain, then nosebleeds she explained away. One morning, while washing Imani's uniform, she collapsed. Nathaniel rushed her to the hospital. The diagnosis, early-stage cervical cancer. Treatable, but it required aggressive therapy. She asked the doctor to speak in private. She didn't want Nathaniel to know, not yet. In her mind, she had already cost him too much happiness to add illness to the list. That evening, she smiled through dinner and kissed Imani like everything was normal. But Nathaniel wasn't blind to subtle changes. He noticed the sudden weight loss, the trembling hands, the blood on the towel she tried to hide. He found her journal by mistake, tucked beneath her pillow, the pages a confessional of fear and pain. When he read the words, "If I die, let him know I never doubted him," his heart cracked open. He didn't confront her immediately. Instead, He sat by the ocean and cried like a boy who had just learned that love isn't always a forever we control. That night, after tucking Imani in, he knelt by Angela's feet and whispered, "You are not dying alone. You're not fighting alone. You're not hiding from me anymore." She broke down, sobbing into his chest. "I just wanted to give you peace, not become your burden." But Nathaniel looked at her with eyes full of grace. "If I can love you with all your storms," he said softly, "then I deserve to stay when they come." Treatment began weeks later. Nathaniel drove her to every appointment, held her hand through every 4-drip, and never stopped praying. Angela, though weak, fought like a lioness. Imani started drawing pictures of her mother fighting dragons, always with Nathaniel beside her in armor. It was during one of these peaceful afternoons, Angela resting after a chemo session, Nathaniel teaching Imani sign language under a mango tree, that a black SUV pulled into the guest house yard. A tall, sharply dressed man stepped out. His eyes scanned the compound like he was reclaiming property. And then he said the words that shattered the quiet. "I'm here for my daughter." His name was Dr. Nathan Amoa, a successful Ghanaian Yenti surgeon based in Canada. The same man who had once walked out on Angela during her 7th month of pregnancy, convinced that raising a deaf child was beneath his ambition. He now returned claiming redemption. "I made a mistake," he said. "I was young, selfish, and ignorant. But I've grown. I have a family court petition. I want custody, or at the very least, visitation rights." Angela stared at him like she was watching a ghost beg for breath. "You knew she existed. You left us to rot," she said through clenched teeth. "Why now?" He didn't blink. "Because I saw the viral video. Because I saw my daughter smile, for the first time. And I realized she should have smiled in my arms." Nathaniel wanted to break something. This man had no idea the years it took to mend Imani's laughter. No idea of the nights Angela cried herself to sleep beside a child who didn't understand why her father never came. But more than anger, Nathaniel felt fear. Fear that the system, so often blind to emotional labor, might favor blood over presence. Angela's health made her vulnerable. She didn't have the energy for a legal war. "He has money," she whispered to Nathaniel. "He'll win if he wants to." Nathaniel held her hand and replied, "Then I'll fight for both of you, not as a stepfather, but as the man who stayed when he ran." Meanwhile, Imani stood quietly nearby, not understanding the full weight of what was happening, only sensing that her family might be breaking again. At that same time in Lagos, Isabella was preparing to testify in a government case against Anthony Aini. The authorities had uncovered years of corruption, harassment, and misappropriated funds. Isabella had evidence. She had seen the abuse. Her testimony would expose everything. And on the day of the court hearing, just before she entered the courtroom, she received a message from Pastor Kojo. "You're not just doing this for yourself. You're doing this for the women who will never get their day in court." She stepped into the courtroom not as the woman who once denied love, but as a woman now brave enough to stand for what was right. The testimony helped convict Anthony. Justice rolled in like thunder. But back in Cape Coast, injustice was preparing a quiet storm. The guest house had grown tense in the following weeks. Lawyers, social workers, and whispered court hearings began to fill their lives. Dr. Amoa pushed for shared custody, then escalated to full guardianship. He argued that Angela's illness made her an unstable guardian, that Nathaniel was not legally married to her, that Imani deserved a better life. His words were polished, but the love in them was empty. Pastor Kojo sat with Angela and Nathaniel, offering prayer and comfort. God gave Moses to a basket, but still found a way to deliver a nation. "We must trust him now," he said. Meanwhile, Imani began to withdraw. She stopped laughing, stopped eating, and one afternoon, Nathaniel found a piece of paper under her bed, a letter written in awkward handwriting and mixed sign markings. "Dear God, my name is Imani. Please don't let them take me away from Mummy and Daddy. I waited long to call someone that name. I don't want a new one. I just learned how to speak. Let me speak with the people who taught me. I know Daddy Nate is not my first daddy, but he's the only one who knows my favorite dreams." Nathaniel read the letter twice, then handed it to Angela. She clutched it against her chest and whispered, "I won't lose her, even if it kills me." They submitted the letter as part of the custody proceedings. Public sentiment turned in their favor. The judge postponed the ruling. Angela's health was too fragile, Imani's attachment too strong. The fight wasn't over, but neither was hope. The guest house held a community prayer service the following weekend. Single mothers, abandoned children, volunteers, all gathered to support Angela. At the end of the service, Nathaniel stood up and read Imani's letter aloud. People wept. Others clapped. Some simply bowed their heads in reverence. Then, from the crowd, Isabella appeared, quiet, graceful, changed. She walked over to Imani and handed her a small Bible. "Inside is a verse I wish I had followed sooner," she said softly. Imani opened it to find Proverbs 24 verse 16. "Though the righteous fall 7 times, they rise again." She didn't fully understand it, but she hugged Isabella anyway. And in that small embrace, 3 lives healed a little more. Angela relapsed 2 weeks before the final court ruling. The doctor called it a crisis stage. The chemo had failed to hold. The cancer was spreading. Nathaniel didn't leave her side. Neither did Imani. As Angela lay in the hospital bed, tubes surrounding her like vines, she looked at Nathaniel and said, "If I don't make it, promise me one thing, that you'll be her father, on paper, in court, in heaven if necessary." Nathaniel nodded, tears falling silently. "I already am," he whispered. "I've just been waiting for the world to catch up." Angela made it through the crisis, barely. She returned home in a wheelchair, frail but determined. The community renovated part of the guest house to accommodate her care. And on a quiet Tuesday morning, in a beach ceremony attended by only the people who truly mattered, Nathaniel and Angela renewed their vows. Imani stood between them, holding both their hands. A week later, a final court order arrived. It granted shared legal custody, with Imani's residence to remain with Angela and Nathaniel. The judge cited emotional permanence as the deciding factor. Dr. Amoa didn't contest. He walked away quietly, realizing too late that fatherhood cannot be summoned by biology alone. That afternoon, Nathaniel began the construction of a new shelter in Mushin, dedicated to his late mother, Mama Chinyere, a place for broken dreams to become blueprints again. At the entrance gate, engraved in iron, were the words, "What you sow in faith, you reap in healing." As they stood by the guest house balcony watching the sun set, Nathaniel turned to Imani and asked, "What's your favorite thing about home?" She signed back, "That nobody leaves." Angela smiled. Isabella, who now ran her own mentorship foundation in Lagos, sent a message later that night. "Thank you for teaching me what I didn't value when I had it." The story could have ended there, tidy, redemptive, complete. But as Nathaniel tucked Imani in that night, a knock echoed at the guest house door. He opened it slowly, only to find a man holding an envelope marked with the Ministry of Child Welfare seal. "We need to talk," the stranger said. And in that breathless silence, a new chapter waited to be written. Please subscribe and turn on post notifications. Thank you for watching.